What if everything you have ever wanted, the success, the confidence, the relationships, the life you keep picturing in your mind, was already within your reach? What if the only thing standing between you and all of it was not a lack of talent, not a lack of opportunity, not a lack of time, but something far closer and far more invisible? What if it was your own mind, not the part of it you can see and control, but the vast, silent, unstoppable force running beneath the surface every second of every day? That force is your subconscious mind. And right now, whether you realize it or not, it is the one making most of your decisions, shaping most of your beliefs, and building or destroying your future on your behalf, without you ever giving it a single conscious instruction. This is not a theory. This is not a motivational concept. This is backed by decades of neuroscience, psychology, and behavioral research. Scientists now agree that upward of 95% of all brain activity takes place below the level of conscious awareness. That means the version of you sitting here right now, the one that thinks it is in charge, is only responsible for about 5% of what is actually happening inside your mind. The other 95%? That belongs to your subconscious. And if you have never learned how to work with it, you have been fighting yourself every single day without knowing it. This audiobook is going to change that. By the time you finish it, you will understand exactly how your subconscious mind works, how it was programmed, and, most importantly, how to reprogram it so that it starts working for you instead of against you. You are not going to hear vague affirmations or shallow advice. You are going to learn the real mechanics of the most powerful tool you have ever been given. And once you understand it, your entire relationship with your own mind will never be the same again. Chapter 1. The Sleeping Giant Inside You. There is something living inside you that never sleeps. It never takes a break. It never gets tired, never loses focus, and never stops working, not even for a single second. While you are laughing, while you are worrying, while you are sleeping, while you are completely checked out and watching something mindless on a screen, this part of you is still running at full capacity. It is processing, storing, filtering, and executing with a level of precision and speed that no computer on Earth has ever been able to replicate. That something is your subconscious mind. And the shocking truth is that most people go their entire lives without ever truly understanding what it is, what it does, or how to use it intentionally. Think about what happens when you wake up in the morning. Before your conscious mind has even fully switched on, before you have had your first thought, before you have remembered what day it is, your heart is already beating at the right rate. Your lungs are already breathing. Your digestive system is already working. Your subconscious has been managing all of it through the night without a single instruction from you. That alone tells you something profound. This part of your mind does not need your permission to operate. It just does. The question is whether it is doing what you want or whether it is quietly running programs that are pulling you in the exact opposite direction of where you want to go. Here is what most people do not understand. The subconscious mind is not some mystical or abstract concept. It is a real, physical, measurable function of your brain. It is made up of neural networks, billions of connections between neurons that have been built and strengthened over the course of your entire life, based on your experiences, your emotions, your repetitions, and your environment. Every time you have done something repeatedly, every time you have believed something deeply, every time you have felt something intensely, those experiences have carved pathways into the physical structure of your brain, and those pathways now operate automatically, below the level of your awareness, guiding your behavior like a current beneath the surface of a river. The river looks calm from above, but underneath, everything is moving. That is your subconscious. And if you have ever wondered why you keep repeating the same patterns, why you keep ending up in the same situations no matter how many times you promise yourself things will be different, why certain habits feel impossible to break and certain fears feel impossible to shake, the answer is always the same. It is not a willpower problem. It is not a discipline problem. It is a programming problem. Your subconscious is running old code. Code that was installed long before you were old enough to choose it. And until you learn how to update that code, you will keep getting the same results no matter how hard your conscious mind tries to fight against it. But here is the part that changes everything. The subconscious mind is not fixed. It is not permanent. It is not a life sentence. It is plastic, adaptable, and extraordinarily responsive to the right kind of input. The science of neuroplasticity has proven beyond all doubt that the human brain retains the ability to rewire itself throughout your entire life. New neural pathways can be built. Old ones can be weakened. The programs that have been running on autopilot for years can be interrupted, revised, and replaced. And when that happens, when you finally get your conscious intentions and your subconscious programming aligned and pointing in the same direction, the results are not just incremental, they are transformational. This is why some people seem to change overnight. It is why someone who struggled with self-doubt for decades suddenly becomes unstoppable. It is why people who were stuck in poverty mindsets for their entire upbringing manage to completely rewire their relationship with money and success. It did not happen because they got lucky. It happened because something in them shifted at the subconscious level. The programs changed. And when the programs change, the output changes every single time, without exception. This audiobook is going to teach you how to make that shift deliberately, methodically, and consistently. Not by force, not by white-knuckling your way through change, but by learning the exact language your subconscious understands and using it to your advantage every single day. Because once you know how this sleeping giant inside you actually works, you will never feel powerless over your own mind again. The giant is waking up, and it is time you learned how to direct it. Chapter 2. The Architecture of the Mind. 2 worlds, 1 brain. Imagine your mind as an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg, the small portion you can see above the water, represents your conscious mind. It is the part of you that reads these words right now, that forms opinions, that makes deliberate decisions, that sets goals and plans for the future. It is articulate, analytical, and rational. It is the part of you that says, "I want to change," and means it. The problem is that it is also the smallest and least powerful part of the equation, because beneath the surface, taking up the vast majority of that iceberg, invisible and immeasurably large, is your subconscious mind. And the gap in power between the two is not even close. Your conscious mind can hold roughly 4 to 7 pieces of information at any given moment. Scientists call this working memory, and it is genuinely impressive for what it is. but it is a tiny bandwidth. Your subconscious, on the other hand, processes an estimated 11 million bits of information per second. It monitors your body, manages your autonomic systems, filters incoming sensory data, retrieves relevant memories, regulates your emotional responses, and executes thousands of learned behaviors all at the same time without ever asking your conscious mind to get involved. When those two forces are pulling in different directions, there is no contest. The subconscious always wins. This is why willpower alone is never enough. You cannot outthink a force 11 million times more powerful than your thinking mind. Understanding the distinct roles of these two parts of your mind is the foundation of everything you are going to learn in this audiobook. Your conscious mind is the goal setter. It is the dreamer, the planner, the part of you that reads about success and gets inspired. Your subconscious is the goal getter. It is the executor, the autopilot, the part that actually determines what you do when no one is watching, what you say before you have time to think, how you feel when a familiar situation triggers an old emotion. The conscious mind decides what it wants. The subconscious decides whether you actually pursue it or whether an old, buried program quietly pulls you back to what is familiar instead. Here is how this plays out in real life. You make a decision. You say, "From now on, I am going to exercise every morning." Your conscious mind is fully committed. It believes it. It means it. It even feels motivated in the moment. But the next morning, when the alarm goes off, something in you just does not want to move. You feel heavy. You feel resistant. You find a reason to stay in bed. And then you feel guilty. And then you wonder why you keep letting yourself down. The answer is not that you are lazy or undisciplined. The answer is that your subconscious has not received the update. It is still running the old program, the one that says rest is safe, that movement in the morning is uncomfortable, that the familiar pattern of staying in bed is what the body expects. Until that program gets rewritten, your conscious desire and your subconscious behavior will continue to clash. The same dynamic explains every pattern you have ever struggled to break. The anxious thought spirals that seem to take over without warning. The self-sabotage that kicks in right when things start going well. The emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to the situation. The people-pleasing behaviors that you hate but cannot seem to stop. None of these are character flaws. They are all subconscious programs, responses that were encoded deep in your neural architecture through experience and repetition, now playing out on automatic, whether you want them to or not. And they will keep playing out until the underlying code is changed. The critical insight here is that the conscious mind and the subconscious mind have completely different operating systems. The conscious mind learns through logic, reason, and analysis. It can change its position quickly when presented with new information or a compelling argument. The subconscious, however, does not learn that way. It does not respond to logic. It does not care how many motivational speeches you listen to or how many books you read at the surface level of intellectual understanding. It learns through emotion, repetition, imagination, and experience. This is not a flaw. This is actually the key to everything. Because once you understand how the subconscious learns, you can give it exactly the kind of input it needs to change. And when it changes, your entire life changes with it. There is a third layer worth understanding here too, the body. Your subconscious mind and your physical body are not separate systems communicating across a divide. They are one integrated system. The subconscious regulates every physiological process in your body, from your heartbeat to your hormone levels to your immune function. And the relationship flows in both directions. Not only does the subconscious mind affect the body, but the body sends constant signals back to the subconscious. How you hold your posture, how you breathe, the tension or relaxation in your muscles, the pace and depth of your breath. All of these physical inputs are being read by your subconscious mind and interpreted as data about your current state, your level of safety, and your emotional condition. This means the body is not just a vehicle for the mind. It is a portal to it, and learning to work through the body, as well as through thought and imagination, dramatically amplifies your ability to reach the subconscious, where real change actually happens. The architecture of your mind is not a prison. It is a blueprint, and blueprints can be revised by anyone who takes the time to read them carefully enough to understand what is actually there. That is what you are doing right now. And by the time this audiobook is complete, you will not just understand the blueprint, you will know how to redesign it. Chapter 3. How you were programmed before you could even question it. Nobody asked your permission. Nobody sat you down and said, "Here is what we are going to install in your mind. Do you agree to these terms?" Nobody handed you a list of beliefs about yourself and the world and asked you to review them before accepting. Your programming happened in silence, in the background, through a process so gradual and so natural that you were not even aware it was occurring. And yet those programs, many of them installed before you were 7 years old, are still running inside you today. Still shaping your decisions, still limiting your possibilities, still quietly telling you what you are and are not capable of, often in ways you would not consciously accept if someone said them out loud to your face. This is one of the most important things you will ever come to understand about yourself. You did not choose your deepest beliefs. They were given to you. And the reason they are so hard to uproot is not because they are true. It is because they were installed during the most receptive period of your entire life, early childhood, when your brain was operating almost entirely in a state of high subconscious absorption. Neuroscientists have discovered that children between the ages of 0 and 7 spend most of their waking hours in what are called theta and delta brainwave states. These are the same states adults enter during deep meditation or light sleep. And in those states, the analytical filter, the part of the brain that evaluates incoming information and decides whether to accept or reject it, is essentially offline. Children do not have the capacity to critically question what they observe and experience. They absorb everything as literal truth. Every message they receive from parents, teachers, siblings, society, and environment goes directly into the subconscious without any filter, without any skepticism, without any conscious choice. It just gets written in, permanently, silently, powerfully. So if you grew up in a household where money was always tight and the adults around you constantly said things like, "Money does not grow on trees," or "We could never afford that," or "Rich people are greedy," you did not analyze those statements and decide whether they were true. You absorbed them as facts about the nature of reality. And those facts became part of the programming that now governs your relationship with money, your willingness to pursue financial success, and even your ability to hold on to wealth when you do acquire it. If you grew up being told you were not smart, or not athletic, or not good enough, or too sensitive, or too much, those words became identity, not opinions. Identity. And identities, once written into the subconscious, defend themselves ferociously. And here is the deeply uncomfortable part. Many of the people who programmed you did not do it out of malice. Most of them were not even aware they were doing it. They were simply passing on the programming that had been installed in them. Generation after generation of unexamined beliefs, unconscious fears, and inherited limitations being quietly handed down like a family heirloom nobody ever stopped to question. Your parents operated from their own subconscious programs. Their parents operated from theirs. And unless someone in the chain consciously chose to break that cycle, those programs just kept moving forward from one generation to the next, each person believing their deeply held beliefs were simply the truth about the world, not programming. Truth. That is how convincing the subconscious is when it speaks. Beyond childhood, the programming does not stop. Every significant emotional experience you have had as an adult has also left its mark on your subconscious. The heartbreak that made you afraid to be vulnerable again. The failure that convinced you not to take big risks. The public embarrassment that made you shrink back from being seen. The betrayal that taught your nervous system that people cannot be trusted. Every one of these experiences created a subconscious association, a pairing of stimulus and response that now fires automatically when something in your environment resembles that original experience closely enough to trigger the old emotional memory. This is what psychologists call emotional conditioning, and it is extraordinarily powerful. You do not have to consciously remember an experience for it to be influencing your behavior. In fact, some of the most deeply embedded subconscious programs were formed during experiences you have no conscious memory of at all. The nervous system remembered even when the thinking mind forgot. This is why you can react to a tone of voice, a facial expression, or a particular kind of silence with a flood of anxiety or anger that seems completely out of proportion to what is actually happening in front of you. The current moment is not what is triggering you. The old memory is. The old program is running, and it will keep running until it gets updated. Understanding this is not about blaming your upbringing or excusing yourself from responsibility. It is about something far more powerful than that. It is about finally making sense of yourself. It is about being able to look at the patterns in your life, the recurring struggles, the consistent blocks, the self-defeating behaviors, and see them for what they truly are. Not character flaws, not destiny, not proof that you are broken, just programs. Programs that were written without your consent. Programs that may have served a purpose at some point in your life, but programs that can be identified, examined, challenged, and rewritten. The fact that you were programmed without your permission does not mean you have to remain programmed against your will. That realization is the beginning of everything. Chapter 4. The language of the subconscious mind. If you want to communicate with someone, you need to speak their language. You can be saying the most important, most brilliant, most sincerely felt thing in the world, but if you are saying it in a language the other person does not understand, none of it will land. The same principle applies to your subconscious mind. Your conscious mind speaks in words, logic, and rational argument, but your subconscious speaks an entirely different language. And if you do not understand that language, you will keep trying to change from the outside while the programming on the inside stays exactly the same. So, what is the language of the subconscious? It is the language of emotion, image, repetition, and sensation. It does not process sentences the way your analytical mind does. It processes feelings. It processes pictures. It processes patterns of experience that have been repeated often enough and charged with enough emotional intensity to be encoded as truth. This is why you cannot simply tell yourself to stop being anxious and expect the anxiety to disappear. You cannot think your way out of a deeply embedded emotional response because the response does not live in your thinking mind. It lives in the subconscious. And to reach the subconscious, you need to speak its language fluently, deliberately, and consistently. Let us start with emotion, because this is the most important element. Emotion is essentially the ink with which subconscious memories are written. The stronger the emotional charge attached to an experience, the more deeply and permanently that experience gets encoded in the subconscious. This is why you can forget what you had for lunch last Tuesday, but vividly remember the exact moment you heard devastating news years ago. The emotional intensity acted as a signal to the brain. This is important. Encode this deeply. Make sure you never forget it. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Your brain needed to remember emotionally charged events for survival. The problem is that the same mechanism that helps you remember genuine threats also encodes fears, insecurities, and limiting beliefs with enough emotional charge to make them feel permanently, unquestionably true. The implication of this is enormous. It means that if you want to install a new belief or a new pattern of behavior into your subconscious, you cannot do it through cold, emotionless repetition alone. You need to pair the new input with genuine emotional feeling. This is why affirmations often do not work the way people expect them to. If you stand in front of a mirror and repeat, "I am confident and successful," while feeling nothing or worse, while feeling a deep undercurrent of, "I do not believe a single word of this," you are not speaking the subconscious language. You are just making noise. But if you bring real feeling into it, if you can genuinely access even a flicker of the emotion of what it would feel like to be that confident, successful person, that is when the language begins to penetrate. That is when the subconscious starts to listen. The second element is imagery. Your subconscious mind thinks in pictures, not in words. When you imagine something vividly, in detail, with sensory richness, your subconscious mind cannot reliably distinguish between that imagined experience and a real one. Brain imaging studies have confirmed this in remarkable detail. When athletes mentally rehearse their performance, the same neural pathways fire as when they physically execute it. When someone vividly imagines eating a specific food, their salivary glands respond as if it were real. When someone visualizes a fearful scenario with enough detail, their nervous system activates the same stress response it would produce in response to an actual threat. The subconscious does not know the difference between a vivid mental experience and a physical one. This is one of the most powerful discoveries in the entire field of psychology, and most people have absolutely no idea how to harness it. The third element is repetition. The subconscious does not learn from a single exposure to new information. It learns from patterns that repeat over time. Every time a thought, a behavior, or an emotional response is repeated, the neural pathway associated with it gets slightly stronger. The myelin sheath around that neural pathway thickens. The signal travels faster. The response becomes more automatic. Do it enough times, and it becomes effortless. Not because you got better at doing it, but because the subconscious has fully adopted it as a default program. This is called consolidation. The brain says this pattern keeps showing up, so it must be important, so I'm going to encode it as default behavior. This is how habits are formed, both the ones that serve you and the ones that do not. And it is also exactly how you build new subconscious programs intentionally, not through a single grand gesture, but through consistent, deliberate repetition over time. The fourth element is the body and physical sensation. Because, as we touched on in the previous chapter, the body is a direct portal to the subconscious. The physical sensations you experience, the feeling of relaxation, of expansion, of warmth, of power, of openness in the chest, are all understood immediately by the subconscious as data. When you physically embody a state, when you breathe deeply, stand tall, relax your muscles, and allow your nervous system to settle, you are sending a clear message to the subconscious that you are safe, that you are powerful, that you are operating from a place of strength rather than fear. And the subconscious responds by reinforcing that state and making it easier to access again in the future. Knowing this language changes everything about how you approach self-improvement. You stop expecting dramatic overnight change and start building the kind of consistent daily practice that actually rewires the brain. You stop trying to argue yourself into a new belief through logic alone and start pairing your intentions with real emotional feeling, vivid mental imagery, physical embodiment, and consistent repetition. You start speaking the right language. And when you do, the subconscious does not argue. It does not resist. It listens. And then it begins to build the new reality you are describing to it, one emotionally charged, vividly imagined, consistently repeated signal at a time. Chapter 5. The Gatekeeper. Understanding the critical faculty. Between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, there is a guard. Scientists and psychologists have given it various names: the critical faculty, the analytical filter, the psychological immune system, but they all refer to the same function. It is the part of your mind that evaluates incoming information and decides whether to allow it into the subconscious or reject it. And it is both your greatest protector and, if you do not understand it, one of the biggest obstacles standing between you and the change you are trying to create. Here is what the critical faculty does. When someone says something to you that conflicts with your existing beliefs, this gatekeeper fires immediately. It raises a flag. It says, "Wait a minute. That does not match what I already know to be true about myself or the world." And then it rejects the incoming information before it ever has a chance to reach the subconscious. This is why you can read the most inspiring, scientifically grounded self-help content in the world and still feel, at a gut level, like none of it actually applies to you. Your critical faculty is working exactly as designed. It is protecting the existing programs from being overwritten by information that contradicts them. The problem is that the existing programs may be precisely what is holding you back, and the gatekeeper is guarding them as if they were treasure. In children, as we explored in a previous chapter, this gatekeeper is largely absent. That is why early childhood programming is so deep and so persistent. Nothing was filtering it out. But as you age and develop, the critical faculty becomes increasingly active. By adulthood, it is running full-time. Every new idea, every new belief, every new piece of information passes through this filter before it is allowed anywhere near the subconscious. Which is largely a good thing. You do not want to be infinitely suggestible to every message and influence you encounter in a world full of manipulation and misinformation. But it does mean that simply deciding to believe something new is rarely enough. The critical faculty will resist it. It will remind you of every piece of contradictory evidence from your past. It will dismiss the new belief as wishful thinking. It will tell you to be realistic. It will protect the status quo with surprising ferocity, even when the status quo is causing you pain. So the question becomes, how do you get past the gatekeeper? How do you introduce new beliefs, new emotional patterns, new subconscious programs, without the critical faculty immediately shutting them down? There are several powerful answers to this question, and the rest of this audiobook will explore each of them in depth. But it is worth introducing the core principle here because it underpins almost every effective method of subconscious reprogramming that exists. The key is that the gatekeeper relaxes under certain specific conditions. It lowers its guard when the analytical mind is calm, quiet, or partially disengaged. It becomes more permeable during states of deep relaxation, during the hypnagogic state that exists in the threshold between waking and sleep, during focused meditation, during moments of intense emotional absorption, during repetitive physical rhythm, and during the highly focused state known as flow. In all of these states, the brain shifts away from the high-frequency beta waves associated with active analytical thinking and moves into the slower alpha and theta waves where the subconscious is far more directly accessible. And in those states, new programming can be introduced with dramatically less resistance than would otherwise be possible. This is the foundation of hypnosis, not the theatrical stage version, but the clinical, evidence-based practice of therapeutic hypnotherapy. It works precisely because it guides the subject into a relaxed alpha-theta brainwave state, where the critical faculty steps back and the subconscious becomes directly receptive to new suggestions and new patterns. But you do not need a hypnotherapist to access these states. You access them naturally every single day, in the moments just before you fall asleep at night and just after you wake up in the morning. In deep meditation, in the zone of focused creative work, in the rhythm of a long run or a repetitive physical practice. The question is not whether you reach these states. You do, every single day without fail. The question is whether you are using those precious, permeable moments intentionally, or letting them pass by unnoticed and unused. Understanding the gatekeeper also explains why emotional intensity is so effective at bypassing the critical faculty. When you experience something with tremendous emotional force, the brain's normal analytical processing gets temporarily overridden. The amygdala, your brain's emotional processing center, essentially hijacks the system and signals that this information is too important and too urgent to be slowed down for analytical review. Encode it immediately. This is why a single powerful emotional experience can install a belief almost instantly, while thousands of logical arguments over years might not move the needle at all. Emotion is a master key to the subconscious. It gets past the gatekeeper almost every time. And this is not a design flaw. In emergency situations, it is a life-saving feature, but it also means that your subconscious has been written partly by random emotional events you did not choose, and that you now have the knowledge to use that same mechanism intentionally and in your own favor. There is one more way the gatekeeper can be bypassed that is worth understanding before we move forward. Repetition, done consistently over enough time, eventually wears down the critical faculty's resistance to a new idea. This is why advertising works. Nobody hears a jingle once and immediately believes the product will change their life. But hear it hundreds of times, and something in you starts to feel familiar with it, comfortable with it, trusting of it. The critical faculty stops raising the flag. The information slips through. The same principle applies to the new beliefs you are trying to install. If you repeat them consistently, in the right states, with emotional engagement, the resistance eventually softens. The gatekeeper adapts to the new input, and over time, what was once rejected as unrealistic becomes the new baseline, the new normal, the new truth that the subconscious defends just as fiercely as it once defended the old one. The gatekeeper is not your enemy. It is a system, and like any system, once you understand its rules, you can learn to work within them and ultimately use them to transform what lives on the other side. Chapter 6. Visualization, the most powerful reprogramming tool you already own. Close your eyes and picture a lemon. Picture the bright yellow skin, the waxy texture, the slight give when you press it with your fingers. Now imagine slicing it in half. See the juice run onto the cutting board, the mist of citrus rising from the cut. Now imagine bringing one half to your mouth and biting directly into it. Feel the sharp burst of sour juice flooding across your tongue. Your mouth just watered. And that happened because your subconscious mind does not know the difference between something you actually experienced and something you vividly imagined. There was no lemon. There was no juice. There was nothing real happening in your external world. But your nervous system responded as if there was. Your salivary glands fired. Your facial muscles may have twitched. Your body reacted to a mental image with a measurable physical response. That is not a trick. That is one of the most important facts about the human brain, and once you truly understand its implications, you will never look at your imagination the same way again. Visualization is not wishful thinking. It is not daydreaming. It is not a motivational exercise for people who cannot handle reality. It is a scientifically documented method of directly communicating with your subconscious mind in its native language, the language of vivid sensory imagery, and using that communication to build new neural pathways, install new emotional associations, and prime your brain for real-world performance before the real world ever gets involved. Athletes have known this for decades. The greatest performers in sports history have used mental rehearsal as a core part of their training, not as a supplement to physical practice but as an extension of it, because the brain research is unambiguous. When you vividly imagine performing an action, the motor cortex activates. The same neurons fire. The same neural patterns get reinforced. The brain is literally practicing even when the body is still. Soviet sports scientists were among the first to study this systematically. In one now famous study, they divided elite athletes into 4 groups. The first group did 100% physical training. The second did 75% physical and 25% mental. The third did 50-50. The fourth did 25% physical and 75% mental visualization. When they measured the performance outcomes, the results shocked the research community. The group that did the most mental rehearsal, the one spending 3/4 of its training time purely in imagination, showed the greatest performance gains. Not the group that trained hardest in the physical world, the group that trained hardest in the mental one. This tells you something extraordinary about how the brain actually works. The line between real and imagined experience is far thinner than most people assume. And what this means for you, for your goals, your confidence, your habits, your emotional patterns, is that you have the ability to begin rewiring your subconscious right now, wherever you are, without any special equipment or external circumstances. All you need is the ability to create vivid mental images and hold them with real emotional engagement. But here is where most people go wrong with visualization. They do it passively. They think about what they want in a loose, vague, detached way, a kind of mental window shopping where they glance at the desired outcome without fully stepping into it. That kind of visualization does not work. It does not work because the subconscious requires specificity and emotional intensity to encode something as real. A blurry, emotionless mental image produces almost no neurological effect, but a vivid, detailed, emotionally charged mental experience, one where you can see the colors, hear the sounds, feel the physical sensations, and most importantly, feel the emotional state of already being in that reality that produces measurable changes in brain activity, hormonal response, and neural wiring. So, how do you do it correctly? You begin by choosing a specific scenario, not a vague concept like success or confidence, but a concrete, tangible scene. You see yourself walking into a room with the posture and ease of someone who knows exactly who they are. You feel the steadiness in your chest. You hear your own voice coming out clear and certain. You notice the expressions on people's faces as they respond to you. You do not watch yourself from the outside like a movie. You experience it from the inside, through your own eyes, feeling what you would feel if this were genuinely happening right now. And you let that feeling grow. You let it become full and real in your body. You hold it for as long as you can, and you do this consistently, repeatedly, in the relaxed states where the subconscious gatekeeper is most receptive first thing in the morning before your thinking mind fully engages with the day, and last thing at night as you drift towards sleep. Do this daily for 30 days, and something will begin to shift in ways you cannot entirely explain through logic. Your default emotional baseline will start to change. The confident, capable, successful version of yourself that you have been rehearsing will start to feel familiar rather than aspirational. The subconscious will start treating it as the norm rather than the exception. And as that happens, your behavior will shift automatically to match the new internal reality, because the subconscious always drives behavior toward what it recognizes as home. Your job is to change what home looks like. Visualization is how you do it. Chapter 7. Sleep and the Subconscious. The nightly window you cannot afford to waste. Every single night, without exception, you cross a threshold. You move from the waking world with all of its analytical noise, its conscious filtering, its logical commentary on everything you experience, into a state of profound subconscious openness. The moments just before you fall asleep and just after you wake up are not simply biological transitions between rest and activity. They are two of the most neurologically significant windows in your entire 24-hour cycle. and the vast majority of people waste them completely. What happens to your brain as you fall asleep is remarkable. Your brainwave frequency begins to slow. It moves from the fast, analytical beta waves of focused waking thought into the slower, more receptive alpha waves of relaxed awareness. And then, in that in-between space where you are no longer fully awake but not yet fully asleep, you pass through theta, the same deep meditative state that takes trained meditators years of practice to reliably reach while awake. In the theta state, the critical faculty, that gatekeeper between your conscious and subconscious mind, is almost entirely offline. The subconscious is wide open, and whatever emotional and mental content you are running through your mind in that state goes directly in, unfiltered, with extraordinary potency. Think about what most people do in those final minutes before sleep. They replay the frustrations of the day. They rehearse tomorrow's anxieties. They scroll through images and headlines that leave their nervous system agitated and their mind filled with noise. They fall asleep in a state of low-grade stress, and their subconscious spends the entire night organizing and consolidating exactly that content, cementing the stress, reinforcing the anxious thought patterns, deepening the grooves of the very mental programs they want to change. This is not a metaphor. The brain's memory consolidation process, which happens primarily during sleep and particularly during REM cycles, literally strengthens the neural patterns that were most active just before sleep. What you fall asleep thinking and feeling becomes more deeply embedded in your subconscious every single night. The reverse is also true. If you fall asleep in a state of positive emotional engagement, with vivid mental images of what you want, with feelings of gratitude and possibility and confidence running through your nervous system, the brain consolidates that content instead. Those patterns become stronger overnight. You wake up the next morning with slightly more deeply grooved pathways, supporting the new reality you are trying to build. And the night after that, the grooves get deeper again. And after 30 nights, after 60 nights, after 90 nights of consistent, intentional pre-sleep practice, the subconscious landscape has changed in ways that begin to show up unmistakably in your waking life. This is why so many great thinkers, inventors, and creatives throughout history have reported their most powerful insights arriving upon waking or just at the edge of sleep. Thomas Edison famously sat in a chair with steel balls in his hands, drifting to the edge of sleep intentionally, so that the insight of the theta state would surface before he went fully under. Salvador Dali did the same. Nikola Tesla worked extensively in the hypnagogic threshold. These were not eccentricities. These were people who had discovered, through their own experience, that the border between waking and sleep was a place of extraordinary mental access, and who used it deliberately. Your morning window is equally important, though in a slightly different way. When you first wake up, you are naturally in a light theta or alpha state. Your analytical mind has not yet fully powered on. The critical faculty is still warming up. This means the first 20 to 30 minutes of your day represent a window of unusual subconscious receptivity, a window where the programming you expose yourself to will penetrate more deeply than at almost any other time during your waking hours. Most people fill this window with their phone, with news, with other people's content, other people's agendas, other people's emotional frequencies, and in doing so, they surrender the most precious mental real estate in their entire day to inputs they did not choose and would not choose if they fully understood what was happening. The people who understand how this works do something radically different. They guard their morning window ferociously. They do not touch their phone. They do not allow external noise in. Instead, they begin filling their subconscious, while it is still open and receptive, with intentional content, visualization of their goals, deliberate emotional rehearsal of how they want to feel and show up that day, affirmations delivered with feeling and conviction, gratitude, deeply felt rather than superficially stated, quiet meditation that allows the theta state to linger a little longer while they plant new seeds. These are not self-help rituals. They are neurological strategies. They work because of how the brain actually functions during these transitional states. And once you begin using them consistently, the cumulative effect on your subconscious programming is profound. Tonight, before you sleep, try this. For the 10 minutes before you close your eyes, put down everything external. No screens, no noise, just your own mind, deliberately directing your imagination toward the reality you are building. Feel gratitude for 3 things, real, deep gratitude, not just a mental list. Then spend a few minutes in vivid visualization of a specific positive scene from the life you are creating. Hold it with real emotion. Let your body relax completely as you hold it. And then let yourself drift to sleep from inside that state. Do it again tomorrow morning, in the first quiet minutes before your day takes over. Give your subconscious the content it deserves, and watch what begins to shift. Chapter 8. Affirmations done right, why most people get them wrong, and how to fix it. Affirmations have a reputation problem, and honestly, it is deserved, but not because affirmations do not work. It is because almost nobody teaches people how to use them correctly. The popular version of affirmations, standing in front of a mirror, repeating positive statements about yourself in a flat, emotionless voice, while a part of you is internally rolling its eyes, does not work. It does not work because it violates every principle of how the subconscious actually receives and encodes information. But affirmations done with the right understanding, in the right states, with the right emotional engagement, are one of the most powerful reprogramming tools available to you. The difference between the version that fails and the version that changes lives comes down to a handful of principles that almost no one talks about. The first thing you need to understand is why standard affirmations get rejected by the subconscious. When you say something that directly contradicts an existing subconscious belief, the critical faculty does not simply let it through. It flags the contradiction. It compares the incoming statement against its existing programs and immediately produces evidence to the contrary. You say, "I am wealthy and abundant," and the subconscious immediately counters with your bank balance, your history, your fears. You say, "I am deeply confident," and the subconscious pulls up every memory of the times you were not. The contradiction between what you are saying and what your deeper mind believes creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. And the stronger the dissonance, the more the subconscious will resist the new input. This is why telling someone with severe anxiety to just think positive thoughts is not only unhelpful, but can actually backfire. The gap between the statement and the reality is so large that the critical faculty rejects it almost instantly. So what do you do instead? The first adjustment is to shift from declarative affirmations, "I am this," "I have that," to process-based and possibility-based language that the critical faculty finds much harder to immediately reject. Instead of "I am successful," which your subconscious can easily dispute, you use "I am" in the process of becoming more successful every day. Instead of "I am fearless," which may feel like a flat-out lie in the moment, you use "I am learning to move forward, even when I feel afraid." These statements are true right now. The critical faculty cannot reject them. And yet, they direct the subconscious in exactly the desired direction, planting the seed of the new identity, creating the new neural groove, beginning the process of building the new belief infrastructure from the inside out. The second adjustment, and arguably the most important one, is the introduction of genuine emotional feeling. An affirmation without feeling is just a sentence. It is the emotional state paired with the words that makes the statement penetrate the subconscious and actually start to rewire it. This means you cannot rush through your affirmations like items on a to-do list. You need to pause on each one long enough to actually feel something, to access even a fragment of the emotional state you are describing. If you are affirming confidence, you need to find a memory or an imagination of confidence and let yourself actually feel it in your body as you speak the words. If you are affirming abundance, you need to find a genuine feeling of gratitude for what you already have and let that warmth spread through your chest before you say the words. The words become the carrier. The emotion is the signal that the subconscious actually responds to. The third adjustment is timing. As we explored in the chapter on sleep, your subconscious is most accessible in the transitional states between waking and sleeping, the first 20 to 30 minutes after waking and the last 10 minutes before sleep. These are the windows where your affirmations will penetrate most deeply. Running through them at midday while your analytical mind is in full gear is significantly less effective than delivering them in those receptive morning and evening windows, when the gatekeeper is relaxed and the door to the subconscious is ajar. The fourth adjustment is specificity. Vague affirmations produce vague results. The subconscious responds to detail, just as it responds to vividness in visualization. Instead of "I am healthy," which is abstract and easy for the mind to ignore, you use something like "Every cell in my body is functioning with strength and vitality, and I make choices every day that build my energy and well-being." The more specific, sensory, and detailed the statement, the more real it feels to the subconscious, and the more effectively it begins to shape the internal reality from which your behavior flows. The fifth adjustment is consistency. One powerful session of affirmations will not change a lifetime of contrary programming. The subconscious builds new neural pathways through repetition over time. Think of it like water carving a canyon. A single pass of water changes almost nothing, but the same water, flowing in the same channel, day after day, week after week, eventually carves something profound and permanent into the landscape. Your affirmation practice needs to be daily, non-negotiable, and sustained over weeks and months before you start to see the full depth of the change. The shifts will begin sooner than that. Within days, you may notice subtle differences in your default emotional state, your automatic reactions, the quality of thoughts that arise unbidden, but the deep structural change, the kind that persists effortlessly and no longer requires constant maintenance, that takes time and it is worth every day of it. When you get all 5 of these elements right, language that bypasses the critical faculty, genuine emotional engagement, optimal timing, specific detail, and daily consistency affirmations become something completely different from the empty rituals most people give up on after a week. They become a daily conversation with the most powerful force in your life. A deliberate, intelligent reprogramming process that, over time, builds an entirely new subconscious foundation. One that supports everything you are reaching for, rather than quietly working against it every hour of the day. Chapter 9. Limiting Beliefs, the Invisible Walls that have been keeping you small. There is a reason you have not already achieved everything you want, and it is probably not the reason you think. It is not that you lack intelligence or opportunity or the right circumstances. It is not that success is only for certain types of people. It is not that the world is unfair, though it sometimes is. The real reason, the reason that cuts across all demographics, all backgrounds, all levels of education and advantage is this. Somewhere in your subconscious, there is a belief that contradicts what you say you want. A belief that says you cannot, or you should not, or you do not deserve it, or people like you do not get to have it, or it is too risky, or it will cost you too much. A belief that operates in silence, below the threshold of your awareness, shaping every decision you make, while you remain completely unaware of its influence. These are limiting beliefs, and they are the invisible architecture of every life that is smaller than it could be. Here is what makes limiting beliefs so insidious. They do not announce themselves. They do not show up in your conscious awareness as thoughts you can directly challenge and debate. They operate through feeling, through impulse, through automatic behavior patterns that seem to arise from nowhere. The belief, I am not worthy of success, does not typically show up as a clear, identifiable thought that you can disagree with. It shows up as a vague, inexplicable reluctance to send the email that could change everything. It shows up as self-sabotage the moment things start going really well. It shows up as the quiet voice that says, "Who are you to want that?" Just as you are about to take the leap. By the time you notice the pattern, the belief has already done its work. The opportunity has passed. The relationship has been pushed away. The risk has been avoided. And because the behavior seemed to arise organically, you explain it away with logic and never trace it back to its true origin. Limiting beliefs are installed the same way all subconscious programs are installed through experience, emotion, and repetition. They typically begin as conclusions that a younger version of you drew from a significant or recurring experience. You tried something and failed publicly, and your subconscious concluded, "I am not capable." Someone important to you expressed disappointment repeatedly, and your subconscious concluded, "I am not enough." You watched someone you loved struggle financially their entire life, and your subconscious concluded that financial struggle is what people like us experience. You were told no so many times in response to a particular kind of desire that your subconscious concluded that desire is dangerous or selfish or unrealistic. None of these conclusions were conscious decisions. They were automatic, protective responses, the subconscious making sense of experience in the way it knows how. But they became encoded as facts about reality. and they have been filtering your perception of what is possible for you ever since. The first step in dismantling a limiting belief is identifying it, and this requires a kind of honest, courageous self-inquiry that most people avoid because it means looking directly at the parts of themselves they have been looking away from. Start with your recurring patterns. Where do you keep experiencing the same frustrating results, no matter what you consciously try? What goals do you keep approaching but never quite reaching? What kinds of success do you find yourself unable to sustain? What opportunities do you consistently talk yourself out of? These patterns are not random. Each one is the fingerprint of a specific limiting belief operating in the background. The pattern in your outer world is always pointing to a program in your inner world. Once you have identified a pattern, you can begin to excavate the belief beneath it. Ask yourself, what would I have to believe about myself or the world for this pattern to make perfect sense as a logical outcome? If you consistently self-sabotage when things go well, you might discover a deep subconscious belief that success brings danger, that it attracts envy, or responsibility you are not equipped to handle, or the loss of relationships with people who see success as threatening. If you consistently struggle to charge what your work is worth, you might find a deeply buried belief that you are fundamentally not worth much, installed long before you ever thought about money or career. When you find the belief, name it clearly, say it out loud. Because giving a subconscious program conscious language is itself an act of power. It moves the operating code from the invisible realm into the visible one where you can actually work with it. The second step is questioning the belief at its roots, not debating it intellectually. The belief did not arrive through intellect, and it will not leave through intellect alone, but genuinely examining when it was formed, under what circumstances, and whether the conclusion that was drawn was actually true or simply the best interpretation a younger, less equipped version of you could manage with the information and emotional resources available at the time. Most limiting beliefs were formed by children or adolescents under stress, trying to make sense of situations they did not have the tools to fully understand. When you look at the belief through the eyes of your adult self with all the perspective, experience, and capacity you now have, it often looks very different. The conclusion seems less inevitable. Other interpretations of the same events become visible. The belief starts to loosen its grip. The third step is replacing the belief with something new, and doing so using the subconscious language you now understand. Emotional engagement, vivid imagery, consistent repetition in receptive states. You introduce the new belief not as a declaration that contradicts the old one, but as a new experience that the subconscious gradually learns to recognize as equally real, and then more real, and then finally as the natural default. This process takes time. The old belief has deep roots, but with consistent, intelligent practice, new roots grow stronger. And as the new roots grow stronger, the old ones weaken. The neural pathway of the old belief gets less traffic, gets thinner, loses its automatic quality. The new pathway gets more traffic, gets stronger, becomes the go-to route. And one day, not all at once, but unmistakably, you notice that the old pattern is no longer there. The wall that you spent years not even knowing was there has simply come down. And the territory on the other side of it is extraordinary. Chapter 10. The Reticular Activating System. How your brain decides what is real. Right now, your brain is being flooded with sensory data. Millions of bits of information per second are flowing in through your eyes, your ears, your skin, your proprioceptive system, the hum of your environment, the feeling of your clothing against your skin, the temperature of the air, the peripheral details in your field of vision, the sounds you are not consciously registering. If your conscious mind had to process all of that information simultaneously, it would be overwhelmed within seconds. So your brain has a system, an extraordinarily elegant filtering mechanism that decides, in real time, which of those millions of bits of incoming information to bring to your conscious attention and which to discard as irrelevant background noise. That system is called the reticular activating system, and understanding how it works will fundamentally change how you think about the relationship between your inner world and your outer experience. The reticular activating system, or RAS, is a network of neurons in the brainstem that acts as the brain's attentional gatekeeper. It is the reason you can have a conversation in a noisy room and still suddenly hear your own name spoken across that room, even though you were not consciously listening for it. Your name carries personal significance. Your subconscious has tagged it as important, and so the RAS filters it through to conscious awareness even amid the noise. The same principle is at work when you decide to buy a car in a particular color, and then suddenly that car seems to be everywhere on the road. The car was always there. You just were not filtering it as relevant before. The moment you assigned it personal significance, your RAS started flagging it for your conscious attention. The external world did not change. Your filter changed, and as a result, your experience of the world changed. Here is why this matters so profoundly for the work of subconscious reprogramming. The RAS does not decide what is relevant and what is not. Based on logic, it does not make those decisions consciously. It decides based on what it has been programmed to look for. And that programming comes directly from your subconscious beliefs, values, expectations, and dominant emotional states. Whatever your subconscious believes to be true about you and the world, your RAS actively seeks evidence for. It filters your entire experience of reality through the lens of your existing programming, brings into your conscious awareness the data that confirms it, and screens out much of the data that contradicts it. This is why two people can walk through the same environment, have the same conversations, encounter the same opportunities, and come away with completely different experiences of what was there. They were not in the same reality. They were in the same physical space, filtered through two entirely different sets of subconscious beliefs, and the RAS gave each of them a custom experience designed to confirm what they already believed. If your subconscious carries a deep belief that the world is dangerous and people cannot be trusted, your RAS will be exquisitely calibrated to detect threats, betrayals, and evidence of hostility in your environment. It will bring those things into sharp focus while smoothing over the countless instances of kindness, safety, and trustworthiness that are also present. And so you will move through life gathering evidence for your belief, and the belief will grow stronger, and the world will seem more and more genuinely dangerous, not because it is more dangerous than someone else's world, but because your filter is showing you a curated version of it. If your subconscious carries a deep belief that you are fundamentally unlucky or that opportunity never comes your way, your RAS will filter out the opportunities that do come. They will not register as significant, will not make it through to conscious awareness, will vanish before you ever notice them. And someone else, with a subconscious belief that opportunity is everywhere, and they are always in the right place at the right time, will walk through the same environment and see possibility in every direction. This is what successful people mean when they say things like, "Once I made up my mind, everything started falling into place." They are not being mystical. They are describing, in plain, experiential language, exactly what happens when the subconscious belief shifts and the RAS recalibrates. When your subconscious truly comes to believe that success is your natural state, your RAS starts filtering for opportunities, connections, information, and resources that support that reality. Things that were always there but previously invisible suddenly come into focus. Coincidences seem to multiply. The right people appear at the right times. It is not magic, it is neurology. It is the direct consequence of your internal filter being tuned to a different frequency. This is also why surface-level goal setting so often fails. You can write a goal on a piece of paper 1,000 times, but if your subconscious does not truly believe that goal belongs to you, if at the deeper level you expect not to achieve it, your RAS will be calibrated for failure, not success. It will bring to your attention the reasons it cannot happen, the evidence that it is not working, the signals that you were right to doubt yourself. And conversely, when you do the deep subconscious work, when you genuinely rewire your beliefs at the level where they actually live, the RAS shifts with them. And your whole experience of what is possible, what is available, and what is true begins to transform in ways that feel almost miraculous from the outside, but are entirely predictable once you understand the mechanism. The practical implication of all this is clear and powerful. The most important investment you can make in your external results is your internal beliefs. Not because of anything mystical or beyond explanation, but because your beliefs literally determine what your brain allows you to see, hear, notice, and act on in the world around you. Change the belief, and you change the filter. Change the filter, and you change the data your conscious mind receives. Change the data, and you change your decisions, your actions, your responses, and ultimately, your outcomes. The world does not change first. The mind changes first. And then the experienced world follows because it was always your subconscious mind that was deciding which world you got to live in. The most successful people on the planet are not operating with fundamentally different brains than you are. They are not more intelligent in any raw, biological sense. What they have, whether they discovered it through deliberate study or through lived experience, is a subconscious landscape that is calibrated for success. A set of deeply held internal beliefs that cause their RAS to constantly scan their environment for opportunities, solutions, and connections that align with where they are going. Every time you do the inner work, every time you choose to reprogram a limiting belief, visualize a new reality with genuine emotional conviction, or guard your subconscious inputs with intention, you are literally adjusting your neurological filter. You are tuning the instrument that determines what version of reality you get to experience. And that is not a small thing. That is everything. That is the difference between a life that keeps confirming your worst fears about yourself and a life that keeps revealing possibilities you never knew existed. The RAS is always working. The only question is whether you are deliberately programming it or letting the accumulated noise of your past do it for you. There is one more dimension of the RAS worth understanding before we move forward. because it directly connects to a practice that you will be building into your daily life. As you work through this audiobook, the Raz responds with particular intensity to goals and intentions that are emotionally charged and frequently revisited. A goal that you think about casually once a week sits quietly in the background of your subconscious, producing only a faint signal for the RAS to work with. But a goal that you visualize with deep emotion every morning, that you hold in your mind with clarity and conviction throughout the day, that you reinforce with affirmations and intentional self-talk, that goal becomes a dominant frequency in your subconscious. And the RAS begins calibrating your entire perceptual experience around it. It starts flagging every piece of information, every passing comment, every unexpected encounter that could be relevant to the realization of that goal. It brings those things into your conscious awareness with a sense of significance that makes you stop, pay attention, and act. People call this serendipity. It is not serendipity. It is your own subconscious, working through the most sophisticated filtering system in the known universe, delivering to you exactly what you programmed it to look for. This is why clarity matters so much when it comes to what you want. A vague intention produces vague results, not because the universe is failing to cooperate, but because a vague intention gives the RAS an unclear signal to work with. It does not know what to filter for. It lets everything through equally, which means nothing in particular stands out with enough significance to compel action. But a crystal clear, deeply felt, emotionally charged intention, one that you have spent real time developing and holding with the full power of your imagination, gives the RAS an exact frequency to tune to. And once it is tuned, the world begins to look different. Not because it changed, but because you did. Because the instrument through which you perceive and interpret everything around you has been deliberately, intelligently upgraded. And an upgraded filter always reveals a richer, more possibility-filled world than the one that was visible before. Chapter 11. Habit loops: how your subconscious automates your entire life. You are not as in control of your daily behavior as you think you are. Researchers at Duke University studied this, and what they found was striking. Approximately 40 to 45% of the actions people perform each day are not conscious decisions. They are habits. They are automatic behavioral sequences that run without any deliberate instruction from the conscious mind, executing themselves in response to environmental triggers before the thinking mind even has a chance to weigh in. Nearly half of everything you do today, you will not actually decide to do. Your subconscious will do it for you, following patterns that have been built and reinforced through repetition until they are so deeply grooved that they require essentially no mental effort to execute. And here is what that means for your life. If those automatic patterns are aligned with where you want to go, that is an extraordinary advantage. Your subconscious is carrying you forward even when your willpower is depleted, even when your motivation has faded, even when your conscious mind is distracted or exhausted. But if those patterns are not aligned with where you want to go, if the habits running on autopilot are ones of procrastination, avoidance, negative self-talk, poor nutrition, shallow relationships, or self-sabotage, then nearly half of your life is being spent moving in the wrong direction while you are barely even aware of it. Understanding the mechanics of how habits actually form and how they can be deliberately changed is, therefore, not an optional piece of self-knowledge. It is essential. It is the difference between being the architect of your own daily experience and being a passenger in a vehicle your subconscious is driving according to maps drawn years or decades ago. The habit loop, as researchers have come to describe it, has three core components. The first is the cue, a trigger in your environment or your internal state that signals to your subconscious that a particular routine should begin. The cue could be a time of day, a physical location, a specific person, an emotional state, or a sensory input. The second component is the routine itself, the behavior that the subconscious executes in response to the cue. This is the action part of the habit, the thing you actually do. The third component is the reward, the payoff that the brain receives at the end of the routine, which reinforces the habit and makes the subconscious more likely to run the same sequence the next time the cue appears. Over time, with enough repetitions, the cue-routine reward connection becomes so strongly encoded in the basal ganglia, a region of the brain deeply associated with subconscious processing, that it operates almost entirely outside conscious awareness. The habit becomes, in the truest sense, automatic. What most people do not understand is that habits never truly disappear once they are formed. The neural pathway that was carved by years of a particular behavior does not get erased when you stop doing that behavior. It gets quieter. It gets thinner from disuse. But it remains there, waiting for the right cue, ready to fire up again at the first familiar trigger. This is why people who have not smoked for a decade can find themselves suddenly craving a cigarette in a specific social situation that was once associated with smoking. The old neural pathway is still there, faint but present, and the familiar cue woke it up. This is also why willpower-based attempts to change habits so frequently fail, because they try to overwrite the behavior without addressing the underlying neural structure. They try to stop a deeply grooved automatic response through sheer conscious effort. And conscious effort, as we have established, is the weakest force in your mental universe when placed against the momentum of a deeply encoded subconscious program. The effective approach is different. Instead of trying to destroy an old habit, which is nearly impossible, you redirect the loop. You keep the cue and the reward, but change the routine in between. This works because the habit loop was never really about the routine itself. It was about the reward the routine delivered, whether that was stress relief, stimulation, comfort, social connection, or a momentary sense of control. If you can identify what reward the habit is actually delivering, and find a different routine that delivers the same reward, you can reroute the subconscious away from the old behavior and toward a new one without fighting against the full force of the established neural pattern. You are not breaking the loop. You are upgrading the middle of it. And because the cue and the reward remain familiar, the subconscious adapts to the new routine much more readily than it would if you tried to change all three elements at once. Building new habits from scratch requires a different strategy. And the most important insight here is one that contradicts almost everything popular culture says about habit formation. Building a powerful new habit is not primarily about motivation. It is not about discipline in the sense of white-knuckling through difficulty. It is about two things above all else. The first is strategic cue design. You need to attach your new habit to a cue that is already reliably present in your existing daily routine, what behavioral scientists call habit stacking. You want to place the new behavior immediately after something you already do without thinking, so that the existing behavior becomes the cue that triggers the new one. The second is making the new habit as frictionless as possible in the early stages, so that the conscious resistance to doing it is minimal, and the loop has a chance to get started and begin building momentum before your motivation fluctuates, which it always will. The reward piece is equally critical. In the early stages of building a habit, before the behavior itself has become its own source of satisfaction, you need to create an immediate, tangible sense of reward at the completion of each repetition. This reward does not need to be elaborate. It can be as simple as a genuine moment of acknowledgement, a conscious recognition of the fact that you showed up, that you did the thing, that you are building something. The brain's reward circuitry responds to that kind of intentional, positive reinforcement more powerfully than most people realize. Every time you pair the completion of the new behavior with a genuine feeling of satisfaction or pride, you are adding a layer of positive emotional encoding to the new neural pathway. You are telling your subconscious that this pattern is worth keeping, worth strengthening, worth automating. And over time, with enough consistent repetition and enough positive reinforcement, the subconscious agrees. The behavior stops requiring effort and starts requiring nothing at all. It becomes who you are, rather than something you are trying to do. And that is when the real power begins, because now your subconscious is not just changing your behavior, it is carrying you forward automatically, relentlessly, every single day, toward the life you have chosen rather than the one you defaulted into. There is one more principle about habit formation that most sources overlook, and it is perhaps the most important of all. The speed at which a new habit embeds itself in the subconscious is dramatically accelerated when the habit is tied to an identity rather than a goal. People who successfully build lasting habits do not think of themselves as someone trying to exercise. They think of themselves as someone who is an exerciser. They do not think of themselves as someone trying to quit a behavior. They think of themselves as someone who simply does not do that anymore. The shift from doing to being is the shift from conscious effort to subconscious identity. And when a behavior becomes part of your identity, when the subconscious encodes it as who you are rather than what you are, attempting its consistency becomes almost effortless, because the subconscious is always driven to act in alignment with the identity it holds. Change the identity and the behavior follows without a fight. Chapter 12. Emotional Reprogramming, Healing the Feelings that have been running the show. You have been told, at some point in your life, to control your emotions, to be rational, to not let feelings get in the way of clear thinking and good decisions. And while there is wisdom in the idea of not being entirely ruled by the emotional impulse of the moment, the fundamental premise behind that advice, the idea that emotions are obstacles to be managed and suppressed, is one of the most damaging misconceptions about the human mind that exists. Because your emotions are not obstacles. They are information. They are not problems to be controlled. They are signals, sophisticated, biologically encoded signals that your subconscious is sending you about its current state, its deep beliefs, its assessment of your safety, your values, and your needs. And when you learn to read those signals intelligently, instead of suppressing them or being overwhelmed by them, they become one of your most powerful allies in the process of subconscious reprogramming. Here is what is actually happening inside you when you feel an emotion. A stimulus arrives, something happens in your environment, or a thought arises in your mind. That stimulus is routed first through the subconscious before it ever reaches conscious interpretation. Specifically, it passes through the limbic system, a collection of ancient brain structures that includes the amygdala, which is your brain's primary emotional processing and threat detection center. The amygdala evaluates the incoming stimulus against your stored subconscious memories and emotional associations, asking in essence, does this match anything from my past that was dangerous, painful, significant, or rewarding? If it finds a match, it generates an emotional response, a cascade of neurochemical and physiological changes that prepares the body to respond appropriately to whatever the subconscious has just classified this moment as. All of this happens in milliseconds, long before your conscious mind has had a chance to analyze the situation, long before your rational faculties have weighed in. The emotion is already there, already shaping your experience and your readiness to respond, before you have any conscious awareness of its arrival. This is why emotional reactions can feel so out of control. They are not generated by your conscious mind. They bubble up from the subconscious, preformed, pre-charged, already in motion by the time your awareness registers them. And when the subconscious associations driving those reactions were formed by old experiences, by childhood events, by past traumas, by accumulated emotional conditioning, the emotions being generated may bear very little relationship to what is actually happening in the present moment. The situation in front of you is new, but the emotional response it triggers is old. It is the subconscious pulling a past template and applying it to the current moment, because the current moment contains enough surface similarity to the past to activate the same emotional program. Understanding this is deeply liberating. It means that when you have an emotional reaction that seems disproportionate, inappropriate, or simply confusing, when you feel a surge of irrational rage, or an inexplicable wave of sadness, or a sudden grip of anxiety that does not match the apparent stakes of the moment, you are not broken, you are not weak, you are not bad at feeling things. You are simply running an old, subconscious program. The emotion is not about now, it is about then. And rather than judging yourself for having it, the intelligent response is to get curious about it, to ask what this feeling is actually pointing to. What old belief, what old wound, what old unmet need is speaking through this emotional signal right now? The practice of emotional reprogramming begins with this quality of curious, compassionate self-inquiry. It begins with the willingness to feel what is there, without immediately trying to escape or override it. Because emotions that are suppressed do not disappear. They go deeper into the subconscious. They accumulate pressure. They influence behavior from even further below the surface. Suppression is not resolution. Resolution requires first allowing the emotion to be present and acknowledged not as a truth about who you are, but as information about what is stored in your subconscious. This distinction matters enormously. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness that observes them. And when you can observe an emotion from that place of awareness, rather than being consumed by it, you create the space necessary for actual change. Once you have acknowledged the emotion and begun to understand what old program it is expressing, the next step is to introduce a new emotional experience in its place. And this is where the subconscious language principles you have already learned become directly applicable. Remember that the subconscious encodes emotional experiences as reality, not intellectual understandings, not logical conclusions, but genuine felt experiences. This means that to install a new emotional pattern in place of an old one, you need to generate the new emotional state with real, embodied feeling. Not just think about it. This is where somatic work becomes relevant. The practice of deliberately creating emotional states through physical embodiment, through breathwork, through movement, through the kind of intentional state induction that communicates directly to the nervous system rather than going through the analytical mind. When you breathe deeply and slowly, your parasympathetic nervous system activates, signaling safety to the subconscious. When you hold an upright, open, expansive posture, you send signals of confidence and capability upward through your nervous system into your subconscious processing. When you practice deliberately calling up feelings of gratitude, love, or joy, not by thinking about them abstractly, but by genuinely accessing them through memory, imagination, or physical sensation, you are bathing your nervous system in neurochemistry that is incompatible with the old, fear-based, shame-based, or lack-based emotional programs. And the subconscious, which is always monitoring your physiological and emotional state, begins to register this new experience as data, as something real, as something worth encoding. And with consistent practice, those new emotional states begin to build their own neural pathways, their own subconscious associations, their own automatic quality. The most important thing to understand about emotional reprogramming is that it is not about becoming someone who never feels negative emotions. It is about changing your default emotional baseline, the emotional state you return to automatically, when nothing in particular is demanding your attention. Most people's default baseline was set in childhood and has never been consciously examined or deliberately altered. It might be a baseline of mild anxiety, or low-grade sadness, or a kind of restless dissatisfaction, or a chronic tension in the body that has been there for so long it simply feels normal. Changing that baseline, raising it, expanding it, shifting it toward a default state of calm confidence, openness, and engaged optimism is one of the most profound gifts you can give yourself. Because the way you feel by default is the emotional frequency you are broadcasting to your subconscious every waking hour. It is the water your thoughts swim in. It is the environment in which your beliefs either grow or wither. Get the baseline right, and everything else becomes easier. The beliefs shift more readily. The habits form more naturally. The visualizations penetrate more deeply. The whole reprogramming process accelerates because you are no longer constantly fighting an emotional undertow pulling you back toward the old reality. Chapter 13. Identity, the deepest layer of subconscious programming. Of all the programs stored in your subconscious mind, the most powerful, the most persistent, and the most consequential are the ones that form your identity. Not your identity in the casual sense of how you would describe yourself to someone you have just met. Your deep identity, the core beliefs you hold about who you fundamentally are, what you are inherently capable of, what you naturally deserve, and what kind of person you are at your irreducible center. These beliefs are so deeply embedded that most people never consciously identify them as beliefs at all. They experience them as reality, as simply the truth of what they are. And because the subconscious treats identity as its most sacred program, the one it is most committed to protecting and expressing in every thought, decision, and behavior, the patterns that flow from identity are the most automatic, the most resistant to surface-level change, and the most transformative when they finally do shift. Here is the fundamental principle you need to understand. The subconscious mind is always, at every moment, driving your behavior toward consistency with your identity. Always, without exception, whatever you believe yourself to be at the deepest level, your subconscious will work tirelessly to confirm and express that belief in your daily life. If you believe at your core that you are someone who always struggles, It will generate the thought patterns, the emotional responses, the behavioral impulses, and even the perceptual filters that ensure struggling remains your consistent experience, regardless of what your circumstances actually offer. If you believe at your core that you are someone who does not finish things, it will quietly sabotage completion every time you get close, finding reasons and generating feelings that make stopping feel necessary or inevitable. If you believe at your core that you are fundamentally unlovable, it will unconsciously engineer your relationships to confirm that belief, making you withdraw when connection becomes possible, creating friction when intimacy grows too close, attracting dynamics that replay the original wound until the belief feels more true than ever. This is not the subconscious being malicious. It is the subconscious doing exactly what it was designed to do, maintaining internal consistency. From the subconscious perspective, consistency is survival. Predictability is safety. The known, even when the known is painful, is always less threatening than the unknown. And so, when your behavior starts to deviate significantly from your subconscious identity, the subconscious creates resistance. It generates discomfort, doubt, and self-sabotage not to hurt you but to restore the familiar, to bring you back to what it recognizes as home. This is why people consistently self-sabotage at the threshold of meaningful success. This is why breakthroughs so frequently get followed by sudden, inexplicable setbacks. The identity has not kept pace with the external progress. The subconscious looks at the new level of success and does not recognize it as home. And so it pulls the person back not through malice, but through its absolute, unwavering commitment to identity consistency. This means that sustainable, lasting change, the kind that sticks and keeps compounding rather than collapsing back, must be identity-level change. It must reach all the way down into the subconscious belief about who you fundamentally are. Because when the identity shifts, the behavior does not need to be forced anymore. When you genuinely believe at the subconscious level that you are a healthy person, you do not need willpower to eat well. The choices flow naturally from who you are. When you genuinely believe that you are someone who creates value and is well compensated for it, you do not need to fight your own resistance every time you need to negotiate or set a price. The action flows from identity. When you genuinely believe that you are someone who handles challenges with resourcefulness and calm, that is exactly how you will tend to show up when challenges arise, not because you forced yourself to, but because your subconscious was expressing what it believes to be true about you. So how do you actually change an identity at the subconscious level? Not by trying to convince yourself through rational argument, as we have established. The subconscious is not moved by logic alone, not by simply deciding to see yourself differently that works at the conscious level for a day or two before the old programming reasserts itself. Identity change at the subconscious level happens through the accumulation of evidence. Small, consistent, emotionally registered experiences of being the new version of yourself. Every time you take an action that is congruent with the new identity, no matter how small, and then consciously register that action as evidence that this is who you are laying another brick in the foundation of the new subconscious self-concept. You are feeding the subconscious real, experiential data that says, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is my nature. The conscious registration piece is crucial and often overlooked. It is not enough to just do the thing. You need to acknowledge to yourself, with genuine feeling, that you did it. not with grandiose self-congratulation, but with a simple, clear, internally felt recognition. I am someone who does this. That emotional acknowledgement is what causes the experience to be encoded as identity data rather than just isolated behavior. Without it, the action passes without leaving a significant subconscious mark. With it, every small action becomes a vote for the new self-concept. And the subconscious, which is ultimately a pattern recognition and pattern expression machine, will eventually look at the accumulated votes and update its sense of who you are to match the evidence. The language you use when you talk about yourself, even in the privacy of your own mind, is also doing constant identity work. Every time you say, "I am not a morning person," you are voting for that identity. Every time you say, "I always get anxious in situations like this," you are strengthening the neural pathway of that self-concept. Every time you tell someone, "I am terrible with money," or "I have never been good at relationships," or "I am just not the kind of person who succeeds at this kind of thing," you are writing code. You are giving your subconscious clear, emotionally tagged instructions about who it should continue to express through your behavior. The most powerful thing you can do is to begin catching those automatic self-descriptions and replacing them with ones that point toward the identity you are building. Not statements that deny your current experience, but statements that describe the direction of your becoming. I am learning to be a morning person. I am developing my ability to stay calm under pressure. I am building a new relationship with money. These statements are honest and they are forward-facing. And they feed the subconscious exactly the kind of identity signals it needs to begin updating its sense of who you are. The speed of identity transformation is not fixed. It is not the same for everyone, and it is not the same for every aspect of the self. Some identity shifts happen surprisingly quickly when the right combination of emotional intensity, repetition, and behavioral evidence comes together. Others require sustained, patient, consistent effort over months or years, particularly when the old identity was installed through significant early experience or emotional trauma. But what is absolutely certain is this: the identity always follows the evidence eventually. The subconscious always updates its self-concept to match the reality it is repeatedly experiencing. Give it a new reality, consistently, with emotional engagement, and the identity will come. And when it does, when you wake up one morning and realize that the person you used to have to try to be is simply who you are now, everything changes. Not as a destination arrived at, but as a ground you now stand on. A new foundation from which everything you do flows naturally, powerfully, and with the full force of your subconscious behind it. Chapter 14. Daily Practices for Subconscious Mastery, the routine that rewires everything. Everything you have learned in this audiobook is only as powerful as your willingness to apply it consistently. Understanding the subconscious mind is profound, but understanding alone does not rewire it. Insight alone does not build new neural pathways. Information held in the conscious mind does not automatically transfer to the subconscious level where it actually changes behavior. What transfers information into the subconscious, what actually does the rewiring, is practice. Consistent, deliberate, emotionally engaged, daily practice. And the good news is that the practices that produce the most dramatic subconscious transformation do not require hours of your day. They require intentionality. They require that you make the investment of conscious attention at the times and in the ways that actually reach the subconscious, rather than simply going through the motions in a distracted, emotionless way that leaves the underlying programming entirely untouched. What follows is not a rigid prescription. It is a blueprint, a set of evidence-based practices that, when woven together into a daily structure, create the conditions for ongoing, cumulative, subconscious reprogramming. Some of them you will already recognize from earlier in this audiobook. Others will build on that foundation with greater specificity. And some of them will challenge assumptions you have about what self-improvement is supposed to look like and how much of it actually needs to be uncomfortable or effortful to be effective. The single most important practice you can implement is what I call the morning architecture. The first 20 to 30 minutes after you wake are neurologically distinct from the rest of your waking day, as we explored in the chapter on sleep and the subconscious. In those first minutes, your brain is still operating in the relaxed, receptive alpha and theta frequency range, where the subconscious is unusually accessible and the critical faculty has not yet fully engaged. This window is your most valuable daily opportunity for subconscious input. Most people waste it entirely by reaching for their phone within minutes of waking, immediately exposing their still open subconscious to a flood of external noise, other people's crises, opinions, conflicts, and content, before they have had a single intentional thought of their own. The impact of this on the rest of the day is real and measurable in how people feel, what thoughts arise most readily, and how reactive or proactive their default state is. The morning architecture replaces that reactive opening with a structured sequence of intentional subconscious input. It begins before you even get out of bed. In those first moments of wakefulness, while your eyes are still adjusting, and your body is still warm, and your mind is still hovering at the border between sleep and full consciousness, you spend 5 minutes in deliberate emotional setting. You bring to mind 3 things you genuinely feel grateful for, not a list of abstract blessings, but specific, vivid things that when you hold them in your awareness produce a warm, real feeling of appreciation in your chest. You let that feeling grow and fill your body. You breathe into it. And then, from that emotional foundation of gratitude and openness, you spend the next 5 to 8 minutes in visualization. You see a specific scene from the life you are building. You step inside it fully, experiencing it from the inside rather than watching it from the outside. You feel the emotions of that reality as if they are real right now because to the subconscious they are. And you hold that state for as long as you can sustain the emotional engagement. After you rise, the next element is intentional movement. The body is a portal to the subconscious, and physical movement, particularly movement that is rhythmic, deliberate, and accompanied by conscious attention, sends powerful signals of energy, capability, and vitality to the subconscious. This does not need to be a long or intense workout. Even 10 minutes of intentional physical movement, done with the awareness that you are not just moving your body but communicating with your nervous system, is sufficient to shift your physiological and neurochemical baseline toward a state that is more receptive to the rest of your morning practice. Follow the movement with your affirmations. Speak them aloud if possible, because the act of hearing your own voice, making these declarations, adds an additional layer of sensory encoding. Deliver them with the emotional engagement and the precision of language you learned in the chapter on affirmations. Do not rush. Give each one time to land. The midday practice is simpler and less time-intensive, but it plays a vital role in maintaining the subconscious momentum built in the morning. It is essentially a reset, a brief but intentional return to the emotional and mental states you established at the start of the day. At some point in the middle of your day, take 5 minutes in a quiet space. Close your eyes. Take several deep, slow breaths that activate the parasympathetic nervous system and bring your physiological state back toward calm and center. Then spend 2 or 3 minutes revisiting your primary visualization with as much emotional engagement as you can bring to it in that moment. This midday visit to your intentional mental world serves 2 functions. It maintains the frequency of the subconscious signal you are sending, which, as you learned in the chapter on the RAS, is critical for keeping your attentional filter calibrated toward your goals. And it provides a neurological interruption to the accumulated stress and reactive patterning of the morning, resetting your emotional baseline, so that the second half of your day is entered from a more grounded and intentional state. The evening practice is where the day is deliberately closed and the night is consciously prepared. Begin by spending a few minutes reviewing the day not from a place of self-judgment, but from a place of curious, compassionate awareness. What moments do you feel genuinely good about? Identify them specifically and let yourself feel that positive acknowledgement, because those moments of conscious, positive recognition are encoding identity data into your subconscious. Then identify one thing that did not go the way you wanted and, rather than dwelling in self-criticism, ask simply, what would I do differently and how do I want to show up in a similar situation in the future? Frame it forward. Encode the new response, not the regret about the old one. Your subconscious does not need a recording of your failures. It needs a blueprint for your improvement. Then, in the final 10 minutes before sleep, return to the practices that reach the subconscious in its most receptive pre-sleep state. Bring your visualization back. Feel the emotions of your desired reality fully. Let your body relax completely as you hold it. Feel genuine gratitude for the progress you are making, even the invisible progress that happens at the neural level every time you show up for this practice. And then let yourself drift towards sleep from inside that state, knowing that as you sleep, your brain will be consolidating and deepening exactly the content you have just deliberately placed at the forefront of your subconscious experience. Beyond these 3 structured daily moments, there is one meta practice that runs continuously throughout your waking hours, and that may ultimately be the most powerful of all. It is the practice of moment-to-moment subconscious guardianship, the habit of noticing what you are thinking, what you are feeling, and what you are saying to yourself in the automatic, unmonitored background of your daily experience, and choosing, as often as possible, to redirect that background noise toward content that serves you. You will not catch every thought. That is not the goal. The goal is to gradually, over weeks and months, raise the average quality of the mental content that you are passively absorbing throughout the day. To catch the moments of habitual negative self-talk more frequently and replace them with something more aligned. To notice when your attention drifts toward rumination or catastrophizing, and gently, without drama, return it to something constructive. Each of these micro-corrections is a small vote for the new identity, a small signal to the subconscious that the old program does not have free rein anymore. And those small votes, cast hundreds of times a day, accumulate into something transformational over time. The cumulative effect of this daily architecture, practiced consistently over 30, 60, 90 days and beyond, is not incremental improvement. It is fundamental change at the level where all real change actually happens. The subconscious begins to sound different. The default thoughts that arise unbidden are progressively cleaner, more empowering, more aligned with who you are becoming. The emotional baseline rises. The automatic behaviors shift. The identity updates. And one day you look back at where you were when you started this practice and realize that the distance between then and now is not the result of any single dramatic effort or moment of breakthrough. It is the result of showing up day after day with a quiet and unwavering commitment to the daily work of deliberately programming the most powerful force in your life. Chapter 15. The life that awaits you when your subconscious finally works with you. You started this audiobook with a question you may not have been able to articulate clearly, but that you have been carrying for a long time. It is the question underneath every moment of frustration when your efforts did not produce the results you expected. It is the question underneath every pattern that kept repeating no matter what you tried to change. It is the question underneath every vision you have held of a better version of your life, your relationships, your work, your inner experience. The question was simply this: why is it so hard? Why? When I genuinely want to change, when I genuinely try, does it so rarely stick? Why do I keep circling back to the same place? You now have the answer. Not a partial answer. Not a motivational gloss that makes you feel temporarily inspired, without addressing the actual mechanism. The complete answer. The reason change has been hard is not because you lack the capacity for it. It is not because the life you want is unrealistic or undeserved. It is not because the universe is indifferent to your efforts or because success is reserved for a particular type of person that you are not. The reason change has been hard is that you have been trying to create it at the wrong level. You have been targeting the visible surface of your life while leaving the invisible engine that drives everything your subconscious mind essentially unaddressed. Still running the old programs, still filtering reality through old beliefs, still automating old behaviors, still protecting an old identity that no longer serves you. Now you know where the real work happens. And more than that, you know how to do it. You understand the architecture of your own mind. You understand how the subconscious was programmed, what language it speaks, how to bypass the critical faculty, how to use visualization and sleep and affirmations and emotional reprogramming as genuine neurological tools rather than superficial rituals. You understand how the RAS is filtering your experience of reality based on your deepest beliefs, how your habits are being automated by subconscious loops that can be deliberately redirected, how your identity is the deepest layer of programming and the most powerful lever for sustainable change. You have, in the deepest sense, received an instruction manual for the most complex and powerful system you will ever work with. And that changes everything about what is possible from this point forward. So let us talk about what actually changes when your subconscious is genuinely rewired. Not in abstract terms, in the concrete, lived reality of daily experience. Because the transformation that happens when your subconscious programming finally aligns with your conscious intentions is not subtle. It is not a minor upgrade. It is a fundamental shift in the quality, the ease, and the direction of your entire existence. The first thing that changes is the quality of your thoughts. When you have been practicing deliberate subconscious reprogramming consistently for weeks and months, you begin to notice that the automatic background thoughts, the ones that arise unbidden while you are doing something else, The ones that have been such a constant presence that you stopped noticing them begin to change in character. The default assumptions shift. The inner narrator, which was once reliably pessimistic or anxious or self-critical, begins to carry a different tone. Not artificially positive, not a forced brightness that feels false, but genuinely calmer, more resourceful, more oriented toward possibility and solution. You do not have to work as hard to think well, because the subconscious, rewired for a higher baseline, is generating better thoughts by default. Thinking clearly and constructively stops being an effort and starts being your natural operating mode. The second thing that changes is your emotional experience of daily life. Your baseline, the emotional state you return to when nothing in particular is demanding your attention, rises. The chronic background anxiety that you may have lived with for so long that it simply seemed like the way things are begins to loosen its grip. The undercurrent of low-grade dissatisfaction or restlessness that drove you to distraction and overwork and compulsive behavior begins to quiet. In its place, something different begins to settle in, a kind of groundedness, a felt sense of okayness that does not depend on external circumstances being arranged in precisely the right way. This is not complacency. It is not detachment or resignation. It is the natural emotional state of a nervous system that is no longer constantly scanning for threats based on old programs that told it the world was dangerous and it was not enough. It is what calm, genuine confidence actually feels like from the inside. And once you have experienced it, you understand immediately why every great teacher across every tradition has pointed to some version of this inner peace as the foundation rather than the reward of a well-lived life. The third change is perhaps the most practically striking. Your relationship with action transforms. The person who once had to fight themselves daily to take the steps toward their goals, who needed to summon motivation and wrestle with resistance and push through inertia, finds that the fight gets progressively quieter. Not because the goals become easier or because the path becomes shorter, but because the subconscious is no longer working against the direction of travel. The resistance that made every step feel like wading through water was never coming from the difficulty of the task. It was coming from the misalignment between where you were trying to go and where your subconscious believed you belonged. Close that gap. Align the subconscious with the direction of your conscious intentions, and the resistance dissolves. Action begins to flow from a place of internal coherence, rather than internal conflict. And action that flows from coherence has a quality to it that action forced through resistance simply does not have. It is more sustained, more creative, more energetically efficient, and ultimately, more effective. The fourth change is in your relationships, because the programs you carry about your own worth, your own lovability, your own capacity for trust and intimacy, and your own right to ask for what you need, those programs shape every interaction you have with every person in your life. When those programs carry the signatures of old wounds, old inadequacies, and old fears, they quietly but powerfully distort your relationships in the direction of those old experiences. You attract what matches your self-concept. You repel or destroy what contradicts it. You see betrayal where there is uncertainty and abandonment where there is simply space, because those were the categories your early emotional programming built. As the subconscious reprograms toward a genuine, felt sense of your own worth and your own capacity for healthy connection, the quality of your relationships shifts to match, Not because you found better people, though sometimes that does happen, but because you are being a different person within every relationship you already have. And different input from you invariably produces different output from others. The fifth, and perhaps the most encompassing change is this: your relationship with time and possibility expands. When you are living from old subconscious programming that says you are limited, that the best of your life is behind you, that certain kinds of futures are simply not available to you, your experienced sense of what is possible contracts around those beliefs. You stop seeing the horizon. You stop imagining with full conviction. You manage rather than dream. You cope rather than create. When the subconscious opens, when the old walls come down, and the new beliefs build their foundations, the horizon comes back. The future that was always there but invisible through the old filter becomes visible again. And with it comes something that is difficult to describe to someone who has not yet experienced it, but that is recognized immediately by everyone who has. A sense of genuine aliveness, of being in the right relationship with your own life, of moving forward with a quality of momentum that feels less like pushing and more like being carried by something larger than your individual effort, something that has always been there, waiting for you to stop fighting it and start working with it. That something is your subconscious mind, the sleeping giant that has been running your life from the background, the vast, powerful, tireless, extraordinarily responsive force that responds not to wishful thinking or fleeting motivation, but to consistent, intelligent, emotionally engaged communication delivered in its own language. You have spent this entire audiobook learning that language. You have learned where the programs came from, how they operate, and how to change them. You have learned about visualization and sleep and affirmations and emotional reprogramming and identity and habits and the reticular activating system and the critical faculty and the architecture of the mind itself. You have learned that the reason your life has looked the way it has looked is not random. It is the expressed output of the subconscious programming you have been carrying. And you have learned, with complete certainty, that that programming can change. But knowing is only the beginning. The beginning is now, and what comes next is yours to determine. Every morning you wake up, you have a choice about what to do with those first precious minutes of subconscious receptivity. Every night you fall asleep, you have a choice about what you send your subconscious to consolidate while you rest. Every moment throughout your day, you have the choice of which voice to listen to, the old program or the new one you are building. None of those choices require enormous willpower in the moment. They require only the quiet, consistent commitment of someone who understands what is at stake and who has decided clearly and finally that the old way of living is no longer an option. You are not at the mercy of your past. You are not the prisoner of the beliefs that were installed in you before you were old enough to question them. You are not condemned to repeat the patterns that have defined your life so far. You are the architect of the most powerful system you will ever work with. You have always been. You simply did not know it yet. You know it now. And from this moment forward, everything changes. Not because the world will suddenly rearrange itself in your favor, but because you will, at the deepest level, at the level that has always determined everything. The subconscious is listening. It has always been listening. Now, finally, you know exactly what to say. The giant is no longer sleeping, and it is moving in the direction you choose. This is where the work begins in earnest. not where it ends. The knowledge you now carry is not meant to sit in the mind as interesting theory. It is meant to be applied, practiced, and lived. Every concept in this audiobook has been given to you not for the sake of understanding alone, but for the sake of transformation. Real, measurable, felt transformation in the texture of your daily life, the quality of your inner world, the nature of your automatic responses, the identity from which you move through the world. You now have a complete map of the terrain. You know where the old programs live, how they were built, and what it takes to replace them. You know the practices that reach the subconscious at the level where change actually happens. You know what your morning can become, what your evenings can do, and what the cumulative power of consistent daily practice looks like when sustained over weeks and months. The map is in your hands. The territory is your life. And the first step onto that territory, taken from this new place of understanding, is waiting for you the moment you are ready to take it. Take it.